Hi, this is Morse Like Monsters, Chapter 4, Part 1. Meet the Real Monsters, in Alto, Michigan, 1977. Now for Chapter 1, 2, and 3, and Part 2 of this Chapter 4. I'll have links to all of these in the description below. Hi, this is Chapter 4, Meet the Real Monsters. Because Morse Like Monsters, the monsters are not the Sasquatch. The monsters are the people. And you'll get to know why now. If you haven't already, you probably know the story. Maybe you've heard it before in a different channel or seen bits and pieces in my old one. But this is my last try doing this story. I've got all the art done. And I'm trying to write the book in two different forms. There'll be a longer form that I'll do after I do a book that's quite a bit shorter that I'll have out probably, hopefully in the fall, sometime before Christmas. That's when the state police trooper and the conservation officer were dispatched to the neighbors, Tim's house, the boy that played with the Sasquatch in the cornfield. Gunshots were going off at their house and they were called down there. The ambulance attendants patched me up the best they could, and about the time we were about ready to leave, my father and I, for me to go get stitches at the hospital. We just pulled out the driveway, and the state police trooper was going by again, and he pulled in and told us that we could go down and see our friends before we went to the hospital, and then they could tell us what went on, that his shift was ended, and he's on his way home, and there's two sheriff department cars down there. So my dad and I headed down there, and we were to swing back by our house after we were done there and pick up my mother and go north to Grand Rapids to the hospital to get my stitches. All right, we arrived down south about a mile and a half to my neighbor's house, Tim's house, the one that was playing with the orangutan in the cornfield. We had left there after the state police trooper said it was okay to check in down there, and there was two county cars down there. I think one was from Berry County and one was from Kent County, because most of the houses were situated pretty close to the border of the two counties. There wasn't any government guys there yet, and the big old yellow Cadillac of the neighbors, Tim's family, his mother and his other siblings, he had two other brothers and a sister, and then the baby. They're loading up that Cadillac. They're getting out of there. They don't know if the situation is going to continue or what, overnight. They didn't figure it was safe. But the father, Tom, was inside the house, and we're directed in there from Tim's mother. And Tim's mother also said that Tim wasn't there, that he was out in the cornfield looking for Mike. Apparently Mike had been shot, but he got out under his own power back through the bathroom window that he came into. I'll get to that in a second. So she says to go in with my dad to go talk to Tim's. Tim's father is going to fill us in on what happened. And we walked in, and Tim's father is pulling apart this hidden camera that he had just bought. It was a beta camera. It was about so big. I'll show you a picture of it. And he had to take a handle off to fit it in here. And it was a story one of us found on the news about hiding it, in your house, even though it was a fairly large camera. And he he took his daughter's teddy bear and gutted it out. And his daughter was pretty upset about it and had to buy her a new one. But he put the camera inside that thing and set it up on a shelf above or close to the TV set somewhere in that area against the wall, and he drilled a hole. I was there when he set it up, because at first he blamed us kids for the missing money. There was missing money, and he figured it was the babysitter if it wasn't us, and he was bound and determined to catch him, or catch her, the babysitter, and had set this all up. And we watched him, and he put the camera in the bear, and he put the cables through a hole in the wall that fed over to a VCR player in the kids' room over there, and he could play it back on the TV if he wanted to, and that's what he was setting up when we went in there, and to see if I caught anything that went on down there. And it did catch the babysitter, and it did catch the behind quarters of the juvenile Sasquatch Mike coming in from the bathroom. I'll get to that in a second. It caught that a little bit, but it was from behind, and it wasn't that good. And one of the county cops, my father, and Tim's father are all watching this as he's putting it together and watching this video. And he's telling us what's going on, or what just went on. And he said they got back and let the babysitter go home. And of course, Tim was there with the baby, but Tim was in the cornfield, you know, from the past chapter video. He had started hearing banging on the side of the house. The whole family did, and it was all around the house, I guess, on the roof. It was a short one-story house, and they had an addition that they were building out back, but they weren't living in that yet. And they're all living in this one little short one-story house. It had a basement in it and everything, and it was mostly made out of brick. And there was a little sump pump outside the bathroom window, right below the window, and it had like a little, almost like a doghouse over the top of it, where you could lift up the roof and get to the sump pump, but it would keep it a little bit more quiet. And that was right underneath the window of the bathroom there. Anyway, this happened right after the babysitter had left. This, you know, he heard the gunshots up at the house and the sirens, and then the banging started in the house. As soon as they got home, and they didn't know what was going on, and they already got the gun out, because they were starting to put together in their heads that there's something really odd, and maybe the big dogs and the orangutan are all connected, and something weird is going on, you know, in my house that they're hearing. So he already had the gun out, and, you know, with all the banging going on, and they're making, you know, probably a lot of verbal noises, he said. They were screaming and yelling, and eventually the juvenile Sasquatch Mike, like I said, broke into that bathroom window and came in through the bathroom, which emptied out, and right into the living room, where the family's huddled up and in the middle of the room, and they had the two TVs on, and the kids were watching football, or the boys were watching football, and the mom and the daughter and the baby were watching something else, like Bionic Woman or something. And they said, you know, it went right for Tim and grabbed his arm, and his father took the shot at almost point blank range, probably about, you know, no more than 10 feet away, maybe a little bit more. And it wasn't a very big living room. But the juvenile Sasquatch Mike had, you know, left a lot of blood, but he had made it. He got shot, he got up, and he went back out the way he came. And I mean, it was a huge blood trail. He couldn't have gone far, but it was, at this time, it was getting almost dark. It was past dusk, you know. And he's telling the story, and he says Tim's still out in the cornfield looking for Mike. So I went out there when my dad still talked to Tom for a little bit before I had to go to the hospital, and Tim was out there, and I didn't hear him calling for Mike. He was on his way back to the house, and he was all in tears, and he was pretty upset. And his dad came out with my dad, and he started screaming at his dad for shooting Mike, you know, that he wouldn't have hurt him, and he didn't have to kill him. And Tim was really, really upset, and that's really an important note there for later, that he was really upset. And he left with the rest of his family and his mom and his siblings in the car, and went to their sisters or something like that for the night. They ended up staying quite a bit longer, but I don't think I'm leaving any details out, but like the camera, you know, like I said, that camera picked it up, but it became the government properties later, and they took everything. And we weren't even out of the driveway going to the hospital. We had to go pick up my mom on the way back north to Grand Rapids to get my stitches. And here comes John Redcorn pulling in the driveway, you know, saying, you know, what's going on, and blah, blah, blah. And they're kind of filling him in and telling him that he'd already knew about that I had to go and get stitches, and he gave my dad a card and said if you get any problems, because my stitches go from my belly button down to my left of my crotch, and then my inner leg, and there are 4 of them, and 3 real distinct ones. And I didn't think about it, but like, to me, I could have just said like it was a board with nails in it or something like that. But he says, if you have a problem, he says, it looks like, a hand mark going down. Give the doctor this card. And we had to use that when we actually got to the hospital, and I think the emergency room attending doctor, or the nurse, called the doctor, and the doctor kind of freaked out. He's going like, this isn't a wild animal. This looks like it was done by a person. And my dad hands him that card, and he goes in the other room and uses the phone, and he comes back and just stitched me up without saying anything. I don't know what kind of power this guy that, John Rencourt is what he called himself. His name was Jerry. I can't tell you his last name. He had a lot of power. He pulled that a lot of times. I'll get to that later, but I got done with my stitches and we headed home that night. But I guess from what I was going to learn later that, he spent a lot of time there in the dark with the cops, and what government guys did show up looking for that body, and they didn't find it that night. I'll get to the next morning here in a minute. It gets even weirder. This is the cornfield next to the house, and this is recently, and the cornfield's still there, and you can see the house. Here in the house, the addition in the back wasn't quite built yet, and the bathroom window here is where Mike broke into, and below it was a little pump house that he got up on top of. What he finds is Tim's orangutan friend broke in through the bathroom window and was now going over to Tim. Then he grabs Tim's arm and starts to pull him towards the bathroom. All the while the family's freaking out, and Mike's family, his parents, are outside the Sasquatch banging on the windows, screaming and making a bunch of noise too. This is all going on at the same time. And then at some point, Tim's father decided he had to shoot this crazy orangutan. Tim's dad was over by the larger TV, pulling a teddy bear off the shelf. Inside that teddy bear was a beta camera. Basically, it was a homemade nanny cam. There was a cable that went from that through the wall to a VCR in the other room. He was pulling it out and trying to hook it up to the other TV to see what happened. He had just installed this camera because he suspected the babysitter was stealing money. I know that because he just suspected us kids the day before that of stealing money also. So he wanted to see if the babysitter was taking it, so he made a nanny cam. And now he was checking out to see what he got on that camera. I don't remember exactly what camera that he had back then that he bought, but it was one of these two most likely. These are the two that were available then. Okay, the babysitter was off the table for being a witness. She was 17. The camera also caught her taking money. The camera also caught her trying some sexual stuff with Tim and I. And Tim knew as well as I did that the camera was there. And we just kind of let things happen. Tim wanted it to just to bust her because he knew that she was taking the money, and he was pretty upset about that. Pretty upset about us getting blamed for it too at first. So that was another witness to be scratched off. The next morning, I get a phone call from Tim's dad to come see the body that he just found. Well, this is the part I hate to even talk about or think about. I think about it every day. The whole thing plays in my mind like a movie if I let it sometimes, and whenever my mind's idle, probably because I've been drawing this stuff and working on it for so many years. I really don't like talking about this part. This is the following day. I get up in the morning and I get a phone call from Tim's dad. The rest of the family is gone. And it was early in the morning. I think the sun had just come up in not even an hour or so. And he said, I found your hairy friend. You want to come see him before I, give him to the government. The government guys, a couple of them showed up the night before and they tried to find the body, and they didn't find it. They were coming back that morning later with some bloodhounds to try to track the body. But Tim's dad, Tom, had found it in the creek out back, and he gave me a call, and I went down to the house. When I got down there, the first person I met down there was another kid that was living next door. And he was a couple of years older than me. He was probably about 12 or 13. His name's Brad. And he says, well, Tom is over at my house, and just my dad and I are there, and he's over there showing him the body. And their house sat up on a hill on the other side of the creek, probably maybe 2.5 acres away, something like that, 3 at the most. And when you're up there, you could look down at Tim's house down there. It sat up on a pretty good sized hill. And behind their house was a pole barn, and they had some horses. I don't know if they had any other animals. I can't remember. They might have had a cow and some chickens. And they had quite a bit of property back there that was fenced off, and a pretty good sized pole barn. And when I got up there with Brad, Tim's dad, Tom, already had Mike's body on a picnic table in front of the pole barn. And it was just laid out there, and it was still wet. And Tom looked like he was wet from, trying to pull it out of the creek. And he brought his gun, probably because he thought the parents might still be around, I would gather. And they were. It was shortly after that when I was approaching the picnic table, and the neighbor, Bill, which is Brad's dad, the older boy, was in a brand new tracksuit, an Adidas tracksuit. I remember this real distinctly. And of course, Tom was wet from going in the creek. But when we all walked up to observe the body that was on the picnic table, there was a bunch of brush alongside of the pole barn there that was almost adjacent to or really close to where the picnic table was anyway. And I don't remember exactly how long it was before we, it wasn't very long. It was a few seconds when we got closer to the picnic table, when the parents did make an appearance, and they came out of that brush and made a hell of a noise. And Brad and I ran as fast as we could up to the house, and we turned around, and Brad's dad, Bill, was screaming, and Tom had grabbed his gun and shot in the air a bunch of times, and scared off the two adults again that were trying to reclaim Mike's body. And we actually could see them continue to run over the hills behind the pole barn, and they went south. And Brad's like, well, that's what a Sasquatch looks like. And they ran away on all fours. But when they approached, they were on their hind legs. They were walking. It really freaked out Brad's dad, and we came up there, and Bill had wet his tracksuit that was brand new, and he we were trying to laugh a little bit, and he's going like, "Don't ever tell anybody this." So I had to add that because I thought it was kind of funny. But shortly after that, we went up to inspect the body. But before that happened, Bill got on his tractor. He had a small tractor out there, and he cleared out all that brush to make sure they wouldn't come back. Forgot to leave out that detail. But then we started looking at the body, and this is where everything changed. I think at this point they were still, planning on, handing the body over. Tom was, and they looked at the exterior of the body and the feet. They checked out the hands. The eyes had. Remember, the eyes have blood inside the eyes, like around the iris and the white part, and they're just like floating around in his eye. And Bill Brad's dad, said that was probably because, you know, all his blood getting pumped out of his body and some of it ends up in the eyes. You know, they're apparently both hunters and they're both talking, so I'm listening as much as I can. My dad was a hunter, but I never seen nothing like what was about to happen. They checked out the face and they moved the jaw down to look at the teeth. And just a little bit at first, and we're looking at the gums and the teeth. And I remember, you know, the teeth didn't have incisors in the front down here. They're like all blocky square all around. And they, you know, they had the little canines like we do, but they didn't have the flat teeth in the front. And all the rest of the teeth were really, really thick. They were just like the teeth we have back here, all the way around on both in the top and the bottom. And I noticed the gums were pink and black, and his tongue was black, but his gums had like black spots. I don't know if it was pink spots on black. Well, that was like that in the roof of his mouth and everything. And then they pulled down the jaw a little bit more. This is when they saw these back strange canine teeth, when I'll try to explain a lot more in the pictures that I'm going to show you here in a bit. At first, we just thought there were attached canines to the top of the skull like this, you know, further in the back that came down like this. But the odd thing was that we moved the jaw, or they moved the jaw up and down, and they would retract, like they weren't attached to they're attached to like some sort of muscle and not attached to the skull at all. And they would like move all the way up to where you couldn't see them, to where they're level with the upper row of teeth, but they're behind that whole row of teeth. And when you move the jaw down again, and this was a dead individual, and it moved up and down like that. And I don't know if they're really teeth or if they're tusks, if they're on some sort of a ligament. That really freaked them out. They decided this, you know, was a dangerous animal. And, you know, really the teeth were so far back, I don't know if they could actually do anything. But that's what prompted them to go like, you know, we got to let people know about this. So Bill and his wife were photographers, and they had a darkroom. And Bill told Brad to go get his camera, and he already had a hunting knife on him, and they were gonna take pictures, and they took a few pictures at first before they decided to cut them up, and they were gonna dissect them in front of the camera. Make me watch. I didn't watch all of it. They took the first pictures. Tim's dad wanted me to go back to the house. They just been shopping that day before for school clothes and whatever they needed for that. And he got some shirts, and he made me go fetch a new shirt. And I came back, and they already had Mike's body kind of propped up, and Tom changed his shirt for a picture, and they put me in the picture with Bill and Tom, Tim's dad, and myself holding the body up. And it's the drawing I showed you. I tried to draw this picture that they took because that's real important, because they took a bunch of pictures and ended up Brad taking those things to school to, you know, get everybody caught. I'll get to that in a little bit. Anyway, they take all these pictures, and they decided to cut them open. And I'm going to stop here because I need to take a break, and I hate talking about this. Okay, this is an aerial layout of the house. Is yellow. A is the neighbors where Tim lived, and B, in the purple B down there, that's where the neighbors were that were dissecting Mike back there in the barn by that red arrow. And to give you a better idea, because this house sat on a hill and it looked down over Tim's house over there on A. This is a current look at Google Maps of these two houses from the road. Well, when I got there, they had Mike's body on a picnic table near the barn. Tim's dad and the other boy's dad were over by the picnic table by Mike's body. and Tim's dad had brought his gun. As me and the other boy approached the picnic table, there was some movement in the brush next to the barn. Out popped Mike's parents. Both of them stood up and started roaring. Tom grabbed his gun and started shooting and running after them again. By this time, me and the other boy had already run all the way up to the house. Tim's dad actually drove them away. The other boy and I could see them run away over the hills behind the houses. We kind of sat in awe. He was like, so that's a Bigfoot. We stood there and watched for a couple seconds, but we headed back over to the picnic table. His dad had peed his pants, his tracksuit, his Adidas tracksuit that he just bought. The reason I say that is like, he was really mad about it. He didn't want anybody to know about it. He said, if this ever goes down in history, make sure nobody ever knows that I peed my pants. While I was getting the shirt, the other boy was getting a camera. That family was into photography and had their own dark room. He had the camera ready when I got back with the shirt. This is the picture they took. They took 2 pictures like this where they had Mike held up, and they took a picture of me with Tim's dad and the other boy's dad holding Mike up. This is basically a drawing of a picture. Well, retractable teeth or tusks aren't completely unknown to mammals. The dugong, a manatee-like creature, also has these, and I'll leave a link to more information on that below in the description. No, I'm not saying that Bigfoot or Sasquatch are a type of manatee. I'm just making the comparison because this manatee is a very old mammal, and they also share another trait that's very similar is their hearts. They both have a 2-chamber heart. They're not exactly alike, but they're very similar. But I'll get to that in a little bit. If you've seen Bob Gimlin's video on my encounters, he said that he made the comparisons with the dugong, but I did in 2018. And also, my father never accompanied me down to the neighbor's house. These are my illustrations of the color of the gums in the mouth and the tongue, and how the back tusks or canine teeth came down with the bottom of the jaw, and kind of how they might look on a skull and how the ligaments and muscles might look. I'll put a link in the description below for this video that's called The Missing Link That Wasn't, and the canine tooth that was kind of odd that they found.
For the skull bones, early Pleistocene, making it the oldest evidence of a human ancestor ever found. The excitement then continued with the discovery of a lower jaw that seemed to match the skull, but its teeth were odd. The molar showed patterns of wear that were similar to those found in humans, and a canine discovered later at the same site was intermediate in size between ape and human canines.
Alright, the dissection they did, Bill started with his hunting knife and opened up his guts from here to the middle of his chest, and a lot of the guts fell out, and I don't know if it was because he was in the water overnight in the creek, but everything just kind of spilled out. Like I said, I thought I was used to that kind of stuff with my dad hunting and gotten deer and rabbits and whatnot. I've seen all that as a kid, and fish, and it seemed a little bit different and made me throw up. I went over by the pole barn and threw up, and I got called back when they're splitting open the rib cage, and I can still hear it, and that wet sound of that snap, and then opening up, and I didn't want to look. I stood a little ways away, and then Tim's dad, Tom, calls me over, and they're trying to explain, what they're looking at. The first thing they noticed was how big the lungs were, and they couldn't decide how far they went over the liver, I think it was. And other things they said, they said something in the effect, well, he's got a penis. I don't see any genitals, and they found the genitals inside the pelvis. This whole time I'm just listening, picking this up. This is as much as I remember, and when they got to the heart, they started pulling it out, and they, I actually think they put a pencil or a pen in there to where they found the bullet hole that went through a larger part of his heart, and it went from the his left side, and it went up and through here, and came out towards the top right. But that's when they found a second part of the heart, and the first thing they said was, "You have two hearts." No, it's some other part of the heart, and I'll get a little bit more into the details when I show you the pictures that I found, and the other things I found out about other mammals that have the same kind of hearts that are really old, like the dugong manatee is for one, and they also have a retractable tusk, but it's up towards the front of their mouth. I'll show you that. Just a lot of odd things they're finding. It didn't seem like it lasted very long, and the whole time Brad's taking pictures. And then they decided to chop his arm off. I believe it was his right arm. And they already had a hole dug for a couple of their horses that died from that PBV poisoning that was going on that year, and it was in the cow and horse feed. And they decided they were going to put the body in there, to hide it in there, and take the arm and put it in a different spot. This is all happening when we were seeing down to Tom's house, Tim's dad's house, that's down the hill. The government guys were pulling in with a couple truckloads full of bloodhounds in the back of them. They sent me down after that, and they went on about their business of hiding the body. They sent me down to go distract the guys down there, and told them I'd seen Tom out back, but only talked to him briefly, and that's about all I told them. And that's when John Redcorn, we'll call him that, that's the name he went by. His name was, I'll get to that in a minute. But he showed up there, and he saw me, and he ended up taking me back to my house, and said he had to go talk to Tom, and that there was some government agents already at my house that I was going to talk to that were going to interview me. He dropped me off at the barns. That's where they're all at. There's a couple of vehicles down there, and there's government people in like white paper suits all the way up. I think, if I remember right, they had, I don't know if they had hoods on or not, but I remember them being in some sort of white suits. And they were casting the prints in the area of where the adults were. At the edge of our property, there was a fence, and that fence, the adult Sasquatch, the male, had like got caught on his foot and dragged halfway into the cornfield behind, and they found prints, and they were pulling the hair off the fence that got tangled up on there. And they're telling me all this while they're interviewing me up where it took place in that milking barn. I think I remember the guy's name actually being Kirk, and he was a younger guy, and they were taking pictures of where everything took place. There were the hay piles with the ropes, and they even took pictures of my my little city with my Tonka trucks up in there. And they interviewed me and asked me everything that happened, and I told them everything that I remembered. And I ended up having to tell my story again to John Redcorn later in that day. There was a lot of interviews and over that weekend, but he headed back down to Tom's, and they went looking for the body for most of the day and talking to Tom, but the body was already hidden at that point. So I spent most of my day talking to, I don't know who these agents were, and they were all nice and friendly, but they told us not to talk about it. They didn't make any threats at that time. They just said not to talk about it. It's not a good thing, and we'll be back if you start talking about it, and we'll hear about it. Somebody in the community will say something about it. And that's how that weekend ended up. It was Labor Day weekend, and there was still, like I think a Monday or something before we had to go back to school for our first day back then. And when that happened, all the other kids came back. The the one neighbors and Tim's family, his siblings came back and his mother came back, but Tim stayed. For some reason, Tim stayed back. He was still mad at his dad or something, and he stayed at his aunt's. And he didn't come back for the first day of school. And I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to take a break. Well, then the one kid's father pulls out his hunting knife, and he goes to cut Mike's chest open. I've seen my dad cut open rabbits and deer and dress them, but this was different. He cut them open and his guts spilled all over the place. And the smell alone. I went over to the pole barn and puked, and they called me a baby and made fun of me, but Tim's dad, he called me back over. He says, "You gotta see this." And I'm walking over there and they're breaking open the breastplate and pulling open the ribs, and they show me the inside. When I got there, they were looking at the lungs. The lungs were huge. They almost looked like a double set of lungs. But I couldn't remember exactly what they said about those, if they were or not. By the time I got there and I started focusing on what they were doing, they really started looking at the heart. They were saying, "Oh, he's got two hearts, he's got no weight, it's a 2-chamber heart." And then they found the trajectory of the bullet hole. He had actually shot Mike through the lung and right through the larger part of his heart. And he survived on this other side of his heart. There were some other details, but I can't remember them all. Because just then, the government guys with the bloodhounds started pulling into Tim's house, which was down below. We were up on a little bit of a hill, so we had a little bit of an outlook. It was just one truck full of bloodhounds, but we knew the rest of the government guys were going to soon show up, and they were going to look for Mike's body that Tim's dad had found in the morning. So they had a hole dug for 2 of the horses that have died from PBB poisoning. And they were going to bury the horses in there for the state to come pick them up, and the hole was already dug. And what they did was they chopped off Mike's hand at the forearm. They took the rest of his body, they threw it into that hole. They threw lime on the body. They threw the 2 horses on top of him, and then they used the backhoe and filled it in, threw the picnic table on it. They did this in a hurry, and they sent me down as a decoy for the government guys. So I headed down there. They did that while I was going down there. They chopped off Mike's hand. They put it in this little steel or metal container that used to contain gloves, and they put it into the pole barn. So that weekend went by of all the interviews and the agents going and looking for the body that they never did find because it was hidden. And finally school rolled around, and Tim was nowhere to be seen. His other siblings were on the bus with me. His 2 other brothers and his sister, and the other 2 neighbor boys, Brian and Brad, also witnesses. We're all on a school bus together. I think there was maybe that first day that we talked about a lot on the bus. It could have been 2 whole days before he brought the pictures to school. It was probably more like at least 2 days. And we weren't supposed to talk about it, of course, but that's all we talked about. Especially on the school bus to each other, and finding out more of where everybody was in the house when that happened, and their version of the story. It was really interesting to hear it all, and it wasn't too long. It was the next day or the day after that Brad decided to bring the pictures to school, and he was in junior high, and the rest of us were all in elementary school. I think he brought it into his biology teacher, the Bakey. And something made him sound the alarm, and next thing I knew, I was getting called down to the principal's office in the elementary school, and Brad's there sitting next to me. Well, Brad's in junior high. It's a different building. And, they brought him over to the principal's office in my school. And the government guy was there, John Redcorn, Jerry. And, you know, they're asking me a bunch of questions, and they show me the pictures. They show me the one picture where I'm standing right next to the body with Tom and Brad's dad, Bill. And Brad's like, you say anything, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm not going to say anything. You know, they all told me not to say anything. When they were burying the body, that, you know, you just don't say anything, they're not going to do anything, which didn't end up being the case. They didn't argue too long with me there anyway. I don't know how long they questioned Brad, but they sent me back to class, and I finished the day out and got on the bus. And the elementary bus and the junior high and the high school buses were running separately. So Brad wasn't on the elementary school bus. They left an hour earlier, and then the elementary school bus would leave after the high school and junior high. So there's three of us, and we went home, and the two neighbor houses were a stop before my stop, before we got to my house. And they got let off, and their house each had 2 cleaning vans in them. Service master cleaning vans out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I didn't think much of it when I saw them at the other 2 houses, because I thought maybe they did have a party on Sunday or something like that. You know, maybe they had a mess to clean up, or maybe they, you know, I didn't think a whole lot about it. It seemed kind of odd until I got up to my house, and there was 2 more service master carpet cleaning vans in my driveway, and my dad's car was home, and he's not usually home at that time of day. Something was up, and I got off the bus and I started walking up the driveway, and I got alongside of the vans, and I could see a lot of people in the house, and all of a sudden the blinds closed. And then I got around to the other side of the house, where I could see in the kitchen window, and there was more people in there. And I ran. And I knew something was wrong. Something was really wrong. And I started running through the field, and a bunch of National Guard came out of the house and tackled me and brought me back into the house. And good old John Redcorn was there, and started questioning me, and I wouldn't say anything. It turned out he'd spent the whole day talking to my dad. He got my dad and Brad's dad and Tim's dad, Tom, all come home from work, and he's been questioning them all day and couldn't get anything out of them. Of course, my dad didn't know anything about it, but Jerry, aka John Redcorn, thought my dad had something to do with it. My family had something to do with it being hid too, and he was getting really pissed, and he took it out on me. And I wouldn't talk, and the National Guard in the house and holding my parents at gunpoint. And there was quite a few of them. I think if I remember right, there was probably 6 National Guard in my house and 2 other agents. So that weekend went by of all the interviews and the agents going and looking for the body that they never did find because it was hidden. And finally school rolled around, and Tim was nowhere to be seen. His other siblings were on the bus with me. His 2 other brothers and his sister, and the other 2 neighbor boys, Brian and Brad, also witnesses. We're all on a school bus together. I think there was maybe that first day that we talked about a lot on the bus, it could have been 2 whole days before he brought the pictures to school. It was probably more like at least 2 days. And we weren't supposed to talk about it, of course, but that's all we talked about. Especially on the school bus to each other, and finding out more of where everybody was in the house when that happened, and their version of the story. It was really interesting to hear it all, and it wasn't too long. It was the next day or the day after that Brad decided to bring the pictures to school, and he was in junior high, and the rest of us were all in elementary school. I think he brought it into his biology teacher, DeBakey. and something made him sound the alarm, and next thing I knew, I was getting called down to the principal's office in the elementary school, and Brad's there sitting next to me. Well, Brad's in junior high. It's a different building. And, they brought him over to the principal's office in my school. And the government guy was there, John Redcorn, Jerry. And, they're asking me a bunch of questions, and they show me the pictures. They show me the one picture where I'm standing right next to the body with Tom and Brad's dad, Bill. And Brad's like, you say anything, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm not going to say anything. They all told me not to say anything when they were burying the body, that, you just don't say anything, they're not going to do anything, which didn't end up being the case. They didn't argue too long with me there anyway. I don't know how long they questioned Brad, but they sent me back to class. And I finished the day out and got on the bus. And the elementary bus and the junior high and the high school buses were running separately. So Brad wasn't on the elementary school bus. They left an hour earlier, and then the elementary school bus would leave after the high school and junior high. So there's three of us, and we went home, and the two neighbor houses were a stop before my stop, before we got to my house. And they got let off, and their house each had 2 cleaning vans in them. Service master cleaning vans out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I didn't think much of it when I saw them at the other 2 houses, because I thought maybe they did have a party on Sunday or something like that. Maybe they had a mess to clean up, or maybe they, I didn't think a whole lot about it. It seemed kind of odd until I got up to my house, and there was 2 more Service Master carpet cleaning vans in my driveway, and my dad's car was home, and he's not usually home at that time of day. Something was up, and I got off the bus and I started walking up the driveway, and I got alongside of the vans, and I could see a lot of people in the house, and all of a sudden the blinds closed. And then I got around to the other side of the house, where I could see in the kitchen window, and there was more people in there. And I ran. I knew something was wrong. Something was really wrong. And I started running through the field, and a bunch of National Guard came out of the house and tackled me and brought me back into the house. And good old John Redcorn was there, and started questioning me, and I wouldn't say anything. It turned out he'd spent the whole day talking to my dad. He got my dad and Brad's dad and Tim's dad, Tom, all come home from work, and he's been questioning them all day and couldn't get anything out of them. Of course, my dad didn't know anything about it, but Jerry, aka John Redcorn, thought my dad had something to do with it. My family had something to do with it being hid too, and he was getting really pissed, and he took it out on me. And I wouldn't talk, and the National Guard in the house and holding my parents at gunpoint. And there was quite a few of them. I think if I remember right, there was probably 6 National Guard in my house, and 2 other agents, both Native Americans, including John Redcorn, aka Jerry. This is what I found when I got out of the school bus when I got home. My dad's 67 gold Dodge Polara was home from work, and there were 2 cleaning vans from Service Master out of Kalamazoo parked in my driveway that were full of National Guard. At one point, he just said, I'm not gonna sit here and question you anymore. And he leaves, and he goes out to one of the vans, and he's out there for a couple of minutes, and 3 of the National Guard see my Kiss Alive 1 album sitting out by the record player, the stereo, that I had listened the night before, and I forgot to put it back in. And they said they'd just been to the Kiss concert, and they're going like, "You're a Kiss fan?" I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, this has something to do with the story. As unbelievable as this, they kind of sided with me right then and there, but Even more so when John Redcorn showed up with a briefcase, a black briefcase, and he opened it up, and there was some needles and some vials of sodium pentothal. And, I still thought it was just going to be a scare tactic. I think everybody in the room probably did, but I was duct taped to the chair with my dad's duct tape because I ran, and I thought I was going to run off, and, he started the procedure. He was just going to give me the sodium pentothal right off. Well, those 3 National Guard, I'm crying, I'm freaking out, and they drew their guns on him. There's 3 National Guards that drew their guns on John Redcorn and the other National Guard and said, "This is bullshit. You got to stop this right now." And that made it more scary. John Redcorn pulled his gun, and the other agent pulled his gun, and the other 3 National Guards had their guns on the other 3 National Guards that were siding with me, and it was a Mexican standoff for a little bit until they just gave up, and the other guys, the other National Guards, took the 3 National Guards that stuck up for me out to the van at gunpoint, and they're screaming at me, "Be strong, be strong," the whole way out to the van. I still didn't think he was going to give me the sodium pentothal, but as soon as those other guards were back in the house, he started administering the sodium pentothal, and he sat there and waited for it to take effect, I guess. I don't remember how long he waited, but he still couldn't get any answers out of me, and he just said, basically, screw it, and picked me up. Had another National Guard guy pick me up while I was still taped up. They made sure my arms and my ankles were still taped up, and they just lifted me up by my arms and walked me out to the van and brought me down to the neighbors where they had Brad and Tom and Bill. When it Bill's would be Brad's dad, down by the pole barn, really close to where they buried the body. And there was more National Guard down there, of course, and they brought me there, and by this time I was getting kind of like I was drunk. The effects were working on the sodium pentothal, and they just kind of tossed me on the ground, and John Redcorn's yelling at me, trying to tell me, to tell him where the body's buried at. And I happened to look at Tom. I didn't say anything. I just looked towards Tom. And he's like, "You drug him up, didn't you?" Tom says this to him, and he takes a couple steps forward, and they drew guns on him. And I kept looking at him. I didn't know what else to do, but all of a sudden, John Redcorn goes, "I see dirt." The picnic table was right behind him where they buried him, and it was fresh dirt. I don't know why they never found it before. The picnic table was flipped upside down on top of the pile of dirt. It was basically really easy to see. And then everybody's mad at me because I supposedly gave away where it was, and Brad's standing next to me, "I'm going to kick your ass," and all this. Well, they used Bill's tractor, the backhoe on it, to get the body out, and the hand was missing, and they started questioning me about that. And they found that in a barrel in the barn, and they said they're all going to. Bill and freaking his son Brad were both screaming at me, calling me a rat, and saying a whole bunch of crap. I really couldn't remember a whole lot, but pretty soon they took me back up to the house in the van, back to my house, because they were going to wait for a limousine. Well, it ended up being a limousine. They needed another car, and it was a government car they were waiting on. It happened to be like the General's stretch limousine, and this is what they were going to take me into Grand Rapids over by the juvenile detention center. I know exactly where they took me. I was really paying attention. That's where they took me to get hypnotized, a little building near that. And I remembered all of it on the way there. And I remember where the room was. Like I could walk to the building. I took pictures of it. I'll show you pictures of it. And I know right where the office was. I remember everything. And he brings me in there eventually. But before he did that, it took quite a while to get the car there. This is my art for the Standoff for the sodium pentothal. This is where the Kiss album was. These are the National Guard that stood up for me, the three behind me. John Redcorn's directly in front of me holding the Desert Eagle over my head. The one guys were outnumbered, and eventually they gave me the sodium pentothal. Pretty soon my ride was here. Some military limousine, I guess that's all I could get, to take me into Grand Rapids over at the Kent County Juvenile Detention Center on Ball Street, this building here. This is where my memory would be erased. Well, they didn't think I'd remember where I was at either, but they took me right back to my old neighborhood in Grand Rapids. I knew exactly where I was. This is the end of Morse Lake Monsters, Chapter 4, Part 1. Stay tuned for Part 2. It should be up within 24 hours, and I'll put a link to it in the description below. Hey, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel. Appreciate it.